Today, there are 2 million descendants of French-Canadian immigrants living in New England. These are our stories. Welcome to the French-Canadian Legacy Podcast.
Venez tous jeunes filles et garçons, je vais vous raconter l'histoire de notre immigration ici au USA, de grands aventuriers, de pays étrangers.
This is the French-Canadian Legacy News. I am Jesse Martineau. Now, as always, there's a lot going on in the Franco-American world, and I want to start by noting the date for the Rassemblement at the University of Maine at Orono has been posted. For those who have not been, the Rassemblement is a great time. I've been a number of times now. Mike and I have presented at the Rassemblement. It's just like a giant gathering of Franco-Americans presenting their work and talking about some of the topics that we like to talk about on this podcast, actually. It's a really cool opportunity to just kind of reconnect with people who share the same passion that we have. And I always leave Rassemblement fired up, motivated to want to do more. And I'm sure this year will be no different. Rassemblement actually will be April 10th through 12th. It will be kicked off with an art opening and talk, which is kind of fun. This will be from Franco-American artist Adele St. Pierre, which would be, again, really fun way, interesting way to start the weekend. Of course, this isn't the only thing going on at the Franco-American Center at UMaine. They actually have a Mardi Gras celebration on February 17th, and they have started something called a Play Along Jamboree, which is cool. People can bring their own instruments and play along with musicians, which sounds like an absolute blast. Also in Maine, our friends at the Acadian Archives at the University of Maine, Fort Kent, have announced that their lecture series will be returning in 2026. It will be held on Thursday evenings from 6 p.m. from February 12th to March 19th. Topics will include native settler relations in Acadia, textile culture and clothes making, transatlantic networks, myths and legends of Louisiana, sounds really fun, and the experiences of Acadian soldiers in the First World War. Super interesting. And I wasn't going to make this, my intention going into the news was not to make this all about Maine, but I pick up things over the course of a couple of weeks that catch my attention. It just happened to be that these ones that caught my attention this week are all from Maine. But because I did want to highlight one more thing that happened on the 23rd of January. The Franco-American Collection at the University of Southern Maine actually hosted a discussion about raising bilingual children. It was talking about some of the fears, frustrations, aspirations, successes of raising children who speak both English and French. And while this event is over, I do think it is really cool to know that these conversations are happening. These are things that are being discussed. And I give a lot of credit to our friends at the Franco-American Collection. They do an amazing job. Now, our guest this week is poet, author, musician, Jean Pouliot. And I actually had a chance to meet up with him in person back in Mike's basement in Hudson, where we used to record all of our episodes. It was really fun to be back in a place where we created, a lot of content that opened up tons of doors for Mike and I. It's particularly fun to interview Jean. It was actually pretty funny because I was up at Rassemblement. My dad and I went to Rassemblement last year, and there was this presenter, Jean Pouliot, who started reading some of his poetry and singing some of his original songs. And after the presentation, my dad tells me he knows this guy. So after the presentation, when there was a break, my dad walks up to Jean and says, and I quote, "I could go to the house where you grew up right now." Not sure that was the best way to reintroduce himself because Jean looked terrified to have a man with a beard and ponytail that he clearly did not recognize up in his face, telling him that he knew exactly where he grew up. But in a bit, my dad was able to properly introduce himself, and it turned out that they were altar boys together and were in the Boy Scouts together as kids. And of course, they probably hadn't seen each other for like 55 years or something similar to that. But it was really cool when they did make that connection. And Jean is now a musician who writes original songs about growing up in the Franco-American community. He also has a book of poetry and some children's books. He was at all three of the Poutinefest this past year, and so it was great to connect with him and speak about some of his work and have him play some of his songs. So this week's guest is musician, poet, children's book author, Jean Pouliot. And one of the things we did not get a chance to talk about in the main episode is the fact that you write for children as well.
Yeah.
And so I would love to know, who is the unsilly Gosling.
Well, everything you write is ultimately autobiographical, right?
Sure. That's
No,
true.
I think the Unsilly Gosling, it's a book about kind of the odd duck out, if you will, in his family. And mom and dad are trying to teach their children how to, go along and understand what the world is like around them. And except for the youngest one, Govan is his name. And you got Gavin, Govan, and Govan.
Awesome. Very cool.
A-E-I-O-U. The first four just kind of go along with whatever mom and dad say, and the other one just can't quite understand it, So they go around the lake, the pond, after they're hatched and ready to go, and they meet various characters around the lake. So they meet Emma Rabbit, who is planting a garden and has been single for many, many years after her husband died. And, it's like mom and dad are saying, well, she should have married a long time ago. Quack, quack, quack. Why didn't she get married? And, she would be so lonely, and everybody's quack, quack, quack. That's the way it is. And Goofin is trying to figure out, what's the big deal here? Why is this a problem? Or the beaver that didn't tip his hat. Mr. Beaver didn't tip his hat, Barry the Beaver, and other characters who do things that are wrong, in the eyes of mom and dad. And then Goofin comes back after he goes up, and comes back a year later, and he goes around the pond and asks these people directly, Emma Rabbit, how come you never got married? And she had a love of her life that was taken by an eagle, and she just could never bring herself, and so she decides that she's going to take care of all the people in the village. The beaver, Barry Beaver, had beaver fever, so he had a hat. So that's why he kept his hat on, because he didn't want to freak people out with the rash on his head. So it's about making decisions for yourself. So the Unsilly Gosling is Govan, and probably there's a little bit of me in Govan.
That's awesome. Well, that's a really fun story.
Yeah.
Now our fathers look at us and sigh with despair, to think that everything they love we simply do not share. But the spirit never dies, our culture will survive. Each of us must choose how much to keep alive. Each of us must choose how much to keep alive.
Special thanks to Josie Vachon for providing the music. You can find more about her at josievachon.com. This podcast was produced and edited by Mike Campbell. If you have any questions or comments, please email us at fclpodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at FCL Podcast for more information about the topics discussed. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to this episode.